Hello friends, welcome to Shiksharthi. In this video, we shall be discussing quadratic equations. So let's start. Now in the very beginning, we need to understand that a quadratic equation starts from a quadratic expression. So we need to understand what is the difference between an expression and an equation. So just giving you a very brief and a broad difference between the two. Expression is just the way to express something. An equation has an equal to sign in between. For example, an expression will be just written like something. I mean, maybe you would say that this is an expression. But when you're writing an equation will always have a left hand side and a right hand side, and in between it has an equal to sign. Right? We shall be discussing and focusing more on this as we progress. So let us start off with quadratic expression first. Try and understand expression first. Maybe we will be talking about most of the properties of a quadratic expression first, and thereafter we will talk about quadratic equation. Okay. So now when we talk about a quadratic expression is basically written like, for further discussions, I'll be using a quadratic expression. I'll be using QEX. Q for quadratic, EX for expression. And I'll be using a QEQ for a quadratic equation for further discussions. So I'm writing it here so that this becomes a ready reckoner. Quadratic equation, I'll be writing it like this. Quadratic expression, I'll be writing like this. Okay. So now once we know that we are discussing quadratic expressions, so let us first talk about how is a quadratic expression formed. So when I talk about the basic form of a quadratic expression, a basic form of a quadratic expression is written like ax square plus bx plus c. This is the basic form of a quadratic expression. But when you are writing a quadratic expression, you need to be very attentive in terms of there are some conditions which are imposed on all of these. For example, I'll divide this discussion into two parts. One is what are ABCs and what is X. So you will see this is a quadratic expression which uses, this is one variable. It uses only one variable. Maybe you can have quadratic expressions which use more than one variable. So as of now, we are talking about a quadratic expression which uses one variable, and incidentally the variable here is X. And along with this, there are ABC. Now what are ABC? ABC are constant terms. So these are constant terms and X is a variable term. Having said this, now you will see that a quadratic expression, so if I have to see now, take it to a next level. So how many powers of X are used in a quadratic expression? X to the power 0, X to the power 1 and X to the power 2. Wherein X to the power 2 should always be there. These may or may not be there. So when I say variable term, how many powers of variable terms are used? A single variable, 3 powers. And those 3 powers I have already discussed here are X to the power 0. Now when I say X to the power 0, I am basically talking about the constant terms only. Let's say here C is the constant term. Okay. Then X to the power 1 and then X to the power 2. Okay, so we have discussed that there are 3 powers. Now further, when I talk about these constant terms being used, so what is a constant? For example, if I write a number like 1 by 2, 2, minus 2, 1 by 3, minus 1 by 3, 0, these are all constant terms. So when I am talking about the constant terms here, so here the constant term is 1, which goes along with X to the power 0, and the other constant terms will go along with the remaining 2 powers. I repeat, what is a quadratic expression? An expression which is written in the form, the basic expression which is written in the form of ax square plus bx plus c, where a, b, c are constant terms, x is a variable term, Now how many powers of x are used in a quadratic expression? 3 powers of x are used. Which are those 3 powers? X to the power 0, x to the power 1, x to the power 2, in which the maximum power will always be there. This power will always be there, and these 2 powers may or may not be there. Right? Now talking about the constant terms. What are constant terms? Constants are basically numbers. What are numbers? Maybe fractions, maybe integers, maybe non-integers, etc. So now here, when I'm talking about the constant terms, one constant term, which is c comes along with this, which is power of x, as power of x is here it is 0. And when I talk about the constant term which comes with x to the power 1 is b, and the constant term which is associated with x square is a. Now these constant terms, the technical language that is used here are, these are the coefficients. So you will see the coefficients will always be termed as the constant terms, and these constant terms are numbers. So when I say numbers, they may be real numbers, they may be imaginary numbers, they can be any form of a number. But the point to be understood here is, this a cannot be equal to a 0, right? So other than this, now when I talk about, so a cannot be equal to a 0 in a quadratic expression. The rest a, b, c can take any number, any number value. They can take any number value. Now when I say any number value, they can take a real number value or they can take an imaginary number value. That doesn't make any difference. But this is very important. So now once you have understood this, based on the discussion that I have done, let us see how many different types of quadratic expressions can be written based on. So we are now going to talk about the types of quadratic expressions that can be written, starting off with the basic type. So let us say the first type here is ax square plus bx plus c, where x is your variable term and the remaining terms are constants. Whether they are coefficients or they are not the coefficients. Okay. The second is, so we discussed few minutes back that the power of x square will always be there. Maybe the other coefficients of other powers of x may not be there. So what I'll do is, from the right hand side, I'll start eliminating. So let's say I eliminate c. This is the second type. Third, I eliminate b. Now when you are eliminating b, that means what are you saying? Here a is non-zero, c becomes equal to a 0. Again, now in the third case you can eliminate b as well. So which is just like saying what? A is a non-zero, b is a 0 and c is a 0 in this case. Right? Okay. Now what is the fourth type here? The fourth type here is, now can I have another form of writing this? Maybe one form is, I can write it as a linear expression into a linear expression, another linear expression. So here we were only talking about quadratic expressions being changed to another quadratic expressions. Now we are talking about how can a quadratic expression be formed. So can I multiply two linear expressions with each other? Now linear expression is when the maximum power of x that you are using there is a 1. And what is the minimum power? The minimum power also is 1. Okay, so this is one such form. The next such form which I can write here is maybe a times of x minus alpha into x minus beta. So you will see now, other than these three, now we are writing it as a product of two numbers. So let us say we are writing it as a product of two numbers. And why are we writing it as a product of two numbers? I am already pointing it out. You are getting an answer from here. Why am I writing a quadratic expression as a product of two numbers? So in a certain way, if you are finding out the area of a two-dimensional figure, it is just like a quadratic expression or a quadratic equation. So area is what? Length into breadth, right? So now when I say, so we know that when we are multiplying two numbers, this one is known as the multiplicand and this one becomes the multiplier, but both of them are factors. So a terminology like factors also arises when we talk about expressions. So you're trying to factorize, and how many factors will it have? It will have two factors. Right? Okay. I hope you have understood this, but the point again that I'm trying to make here is, when you are writing this as a linear, linear into linear, please ensure that A into C should not be equal to a 0. And at the same time, when you are writing this, then again you should specify that A should not be equal to 0. The remaining conditions remain the same. What are the remaining conditions? Here the constant terms that you are using, A, B, C, D, all of them can take any number value. When I say any number value, in addition to this or other than this. So when we are saying A into C should not be equal to 0, that means one of them or both of them, because if I say one of them, it becomes incorrect. Why does it become incorrect? Because if I say A should not be equal to 0, C can be equal to a 0, in that case it will no longer be a quadratic expression. So revising this or revisiting this, we will say that A and C, both of them individually should not be equal to a 0. Henceforth, the expression of this sort that you will be getting would be, and then you can always make changes here. For example, you can eliminate B into D. You can eliminate the coefficient of this and that. The last thing here to be discussed under the head of expressions. Now, there is a technical word that is given to A and C. Now, C is known as the trailing coefficient because it lags behind. And A is known as the leading coefficient. Now once you know this, what about B? B doesn't have any specific name, but you can always say B is an in-between coefficient, interim, intermediate or whatsoever, but it doesn't have a technical name here. And how many coefficients do we have here? 3 coefficients. So these 3 powers would decide how many coefficients of various powers of x? 3 coefficients. Right? So now the remaining things on quadratic equations and expressions, we'll be discussing it in our series of videos on quadratic equations and expressions. So if you feel that this video is really informative and it gives you a unique perspective on quadratic expressions, please do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel. If you have already done so, click on the bell icon so that you start receiving updates from us regularly. If you want us to do some specific videos on specific topics, put it in the comment section so that we can do it for you. Thank you so much. Until next we meet, goodbye.